Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't belong not because of anything you did, but simply because of how you looked? That's what happened to Thomas Garrett on an ordinary Thursday morning. He wasn't wearing a suit, he wasn't chauffeured in a Bentley, and he certainly didn't carry the kind of arrogance people at Chandler Prestige Motors had come to expect from a man looking at a six-figure car. He just stepped out of a 2008 Honda Civic, jeans slightly faded, a navy blue polo shirt tucked in neatly. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just normal. But Thomas Garrett was anything but ordinary. At 45, he was the quiet force behind Garrett Systems, one of the most successful tech infrastructure firms in the United States. A self-made billionaire who had grown up in a single-parent household on the south side of Chicago. He knew what it meant to build from nothing, and today, he wasn't here as a CEO. He wasn't here as a power figure, he was here as a dad. His daughter, Maya, had just graduated from Harvard Business School with top honors. She was brilliant, resilient, and everything Thomas had hoped she would become. And as a gift for her years of dedication, he wanted to surprise her with the exact car she'd dreamed about since college, a sapphire blue Porsche Taycan. It wasn't about the brand, it wasn't even about the price tag. It was about what it represented: freedom, pride, and a father's love wrapped into a bow. Thomas didn't call ahead. He didn't schedule an appointment or send an assistant. That wasn't his style. He wanted to walk into the dealership like any other man would. To be treated like a customer, not a figurehead. The moment he pushed open the glass doors, the cool air and scent of leather and polished chrome hit him. Inside, Chandler Prestige Motors was exactly what you'd expect from a luxury dealership in the heart of Beverly Hills. Sleek marble floors, designer lighting, hushed voices discussing trim options, and salespeople wearing designer shoes and thinly veiled arrogance. At first, no one greeted him. That was fine. He walked slowly across the showroom, admiring the craftsmanship of each vehicle like a man savoring a quiet dream. Then he saw it. The car. Midnight blue, red calipers, pristine body, custom rims. It looked like power and elegance had been molded into motion. He couldn't help but smile. And that's when it happened. "Excuse me, sir," a voice called out from behind him. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't curious. It was skeptical. A man in his mid-30s with slicked back hair and a jawline carved in corporate arrogance stepped toward him. His name tag read Brandon Cole, floor manager. Thomas turned with a relaxed smile. "Good morning." Brandon didn't smile back. "Can I help you with something?" His tone wasn't offering help, it was asking for justification. "Yes," Thomas said simply. "I was looking at this Taycan. My daughter's graduation is next week, and I—" Brandon cut him off with a laugh. It was quick, sharp, and filled with condescension. "That car starts at $170,000. You sure you're in the right place?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I am." Brandon glanced down at Thomas's sneakers. "Not expensive, not new. This isn't a rental showroom. We don't do window shopping here." The line cut deeper than intended. Thomas said nothing for a moment, letting the silence settle. Across the room, two sales associates whispered and chuckled. Thomas could feel their eyes on him, judging, assuming, dismissing. He turned back to the car. "She's always loved the Taycan. Used to have pictures of it taped to her dorm wall." Brandon gave a short breath through his nose, barely holding back another chuckle. "Look, man, we have a certified pre-owned section down the road. You might have better luck there." It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them. The smug smile, the tone of someone who had already decided who you were, and more importantly, who you weren't. Thomas folded his hands calmly. "And if I wanted to speak to someone else?" Brandon shrugged. "There's no one else. I run this floor, and I'm telling you, you're not our usual client." Behind Brandon, another man approached Chase, a younger salesman with designer shades still perched on his head, sipping a cappuccino. "Everything okay here, B?" "Just redirecting someone who got a little lost," Brandon said, not breaking eye contact with Thomas. Thomas didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. But something shifted in his eyes. A flicker. A quiet fire. A young woman near the reception desk, a junior staffer named Erica Miles, watched the entire scene. She'd only been working at Chandler Motors for 2 months. But what she saw in Thomas's posture, in his calm silence, made her gut twist. This wasn't some guy off the street. Something didn't add up. She could feel it. And just then, Thomas reached into his pocket, not for a wallet, not for a checkbook, but for his phone. He opened a message and typed just 2 words. "Activate meeting." He hit send. And everything was about to change. The message had been sent. 2 words. Activate meeting. It was so simple, so casual, that no one in the showroom could have guessed what it meant. Brandon certainly didn't. He was too busy enjoying his self-appointed role as gatekeeper of Chandler Prestige Motors. The showroom was his kingdom, and Thomas Garrett, in Brandon's eyes, was just another uninvited guest, disturbing the curated image of luxury. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Brandon said flatly. "You've made your point. This isn't a playground." I didn't know looking at a car was considered playing, Thomas replied, his voice still calm. I haven't raised my voice, touched anything I shouldn't have, or done anything besides show interest in a product. You've loitered long enough, Brandon snapped. Security's on the way. Thomas nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Then I'll wait. Across the floor, Erica's breath caught. She looked around, hoping someone would intervene, but no one did. Some staff members pretended not to notice, their eyes fixed on iPads and paperwork. Others watched like spectators at a show, intrigued by the spectacle, but unwilling to question the ringmaster. Then, a customer chimed in. An older white man in a tailored suit leaned over to his wife and muttered, just loud enough, "People like that never know when to leave." His wife pursed her lips. "Brings down the whole environment." Thomas heard it, every word, but he didn't respond. Instead, he glanced briefly at his reflection in the polished chrome of the Porsche's front grille. What did they see when they looked at him? A nobody? An intruder? Certainly not the man who paid the salaries of more people than they'd ever meet. Security arrived. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a black blazer approached with caution. His name tag read Anthony Reyes. He looked from Brandon to Thomas, then back again, sensing tension. "Sir," he said gently to Thomas, "we've received a report. I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." Thomas nodded respectfully. "I understand. You're just doing your job." He turned toward the exit, walking slowly, deliberately. The room was silent except for the faint sound of jazz humming through ceiling speakers. Brandon crossed his arms smugly. "That's right," he muttered under his breath. "Keep walking." But just before the doors closed behind him, Thomas stopped. He turned his head slightly and spoke to no one in particular. "Remember this moment." Then he walked out. Erica stared at the door long after it closed. She wanted to scream, to shout at Brandon, to say something, but she was afraid. She needed this job. Rent was due. Her little brother's school books weren't going to pay for themselves, so she said nothing. Inside, Brandon chuckled to Chase. "Guy really thought he could walk in here and drive off in a Porsche." Chase laughed. "Probably thought we'd roll out a red carpet." Neither of them noticed Erica discreetly typing something into her phone, a short message to someone she trusted. She didn't know who that man was, but everything in her gut told her the people inside this dealership had just made a mistake they'd never recover from. Outside, Thomas sat in his car, not the Porsche, but his old Honda Civic. He checked his phone. 3 board members had already responded. The legal team was prepping documentation. The regional director of Chandler Prestige Motors was rerouting his flight. And his executive assistant, Claire, had replied with, confirming, "You want full presence at location in 58 minutes? Thomas responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Back inside the dealership, Brandon was still boasting. "I mean, you saw the guy, right?" he said to a group of staff now congregating near the espresso bar. "Those sneakers? The car? Man walks into a place like this dressed like that. It tells you everything you need to know." "Yeah," Chase added. "I thought he was going to ask to test drive it, just to see what it felt like." Laughter rippled through the group, but Erica couldn't laugh. She excused herself and stepped outside, dialing a number she hadn't used since orientation. It rang once, twice. "Hello? Miss Delaney, I know this is unusual," Erica said, "but I think something really wrong just happened, and I think you're going to want to know about it before it hits the news." 30 minutes later, the energy in the dealership changed. The front lot, usually reserved for the highest-end models, was suddenly occupied by a line of black vehicles with tinted windows. A Mercedes Maybach, a black Escalade, a Range Rover with federal tags. The first person to step out was Claire Whitaker, dressed in tailored gray with a sleek tablet in hand. She looked like someone who didn't ask for permission. Behind her came Gregory Levesque, the general counsel for Garrett Systems. And then, Thomas. But this wasn't the Thomas in the navy polo. This Thomas wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit, a platinum watch, and a presence that felt different. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was something much more intimidating. He was in control. The moment Thomas Garrett walked through the glass doors, this time in a suit, flanked by legal counsel and board members, you could feel the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Every eye turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A customer mid-sip of complimentary champagne froze with the glass halfway to his mouth. Brandon blinked, confused. Then he squinted. Something about the man in the suit looked familiar. "Number, it couldn't be." "Can I help you?" he asked, voice noticeably less confident than it had been an hour ago. Thomas didn't respond. He simply walked forward with the quiet confidence of a man reclaiming territory. Claire Whitaker, his assistant, stopped at the front desk and tapped her tablet. "Clear all active appointments," she told the receptionist. "This facility is temporarily closed to public operations." The receptionist didn't question her. Something in Claire's voice made compliance feel like instinct. Brandon stepped forward again, trying to regain control. "I'm sorry, who exactly?" Thomas finally turned to him. "I believe we met this morning," he said. though you didn't bother asking for my name then." Brandon laughed awkwardly. "Look, I didn't mean anything personal. We have a certain clientele here, and I just—" Thomas cut him off. "My name is Thomas Garrett," he said, his voice steady and low. "I'm the CEO and principal owner of Garrett Systems, the parent company of Chandler Prestige Motors. This location, and 22 others, like it across the country, are mine." Brandon's face went slack. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Thomas didn't stop. "And this morning," he continued, "you humiliated me in front of customers and staff. You denied me service. You laughed at me. All because I didn't fit your image of a real customer." He turned to address the entire showroom. "I built this company from the ground up. I hired the executives who sign your paychecks. And I came here today as a father, not a CEO. A father looking to buy his daughter a graduation gift. Instead, I was treated like a trespasser in my own house." The silence that followed was suffocating. Brandon looked pale, like he was about to be sick. Chase took a discreet step backward, suddenly fascinated by a spot on the floor. A few staff members edged away from the scene entirely, hoping not to be noticed. Claire stepped forward. "Mr. Cole," she said crisply, addressing Brandon by full name, "you're hereby terminated, effective immediately. You'll be escorted from the premises after you clean out your desk." "What?" Brandon gasped. "No, wait, this is a misunderstanding. I was doing my job." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Your job was to serve every customer with professionalism and respect. Instead, you decided to play gatekeeper, to humiliate, to exclude." He pointed toward the exit. "Get out of my showroom." Security didn't need to be called this time. Brandon turned slowly, his shoulders hunched, and walked toward the employee hallway like a man heading to execution. Chase wasn't so lucky. Gregory Levesque, the company's general counsel, handed him a folder. "You too," he said. "Your comments, captured on internal surveillance, are grounds for immediate dismissal." "What comments?" Chase stammered. "Window shopper in dad's shoes," Claire read aloud. "And, I quote, roll out a red carpet for that guy?" Chase went red, then white. "That was just joking locker room stuff." Thomas stared at him. "This isn't a locker room, it's a business, and I don't tolerate toxic culture." Both men were escorted out by silent, stone-faced security guards. Then Thomas turned to face the employees who remained. Some were young, some were seasoned, some had watched the entire humiliation unfold that morning and said nothing. Others, like Erica, had looked visibly uncomfortable. Erica stood quietly by the desk, her eyes glassy. She hadn't moved since Thomas walked in. "You," he said, pointing gently. "What's your name?" "Erica Miles," she whispered. Thomas nodded. "You tried to speak up earlier, didn't you?" She hesitated. "I wanted to, but I was afraid." "That's human," he said. "But you still did something. You reached out. Someone in this room did the right thing, and I want to believe it was you." Claire smiled at Erica. "We traced the call. You're the reason the executive team showed up in time." Erica's hand flew to her mouth in disbelief. Just thought someone had to know." Thomas stepped closer. "And that is exactly the kind of leadership we need. Would you be open to stepping into a training program? I want to invest in people who care." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Yes, sir. Thank you." As Erica stepped away with Claire, staff began to murmur. Whispers turned into quiet nods. And then something unexpected happened. A customary older white man in a tailored vest who'd earlier chuckled at Thomas stepped forward. "Mr. Garrett," he said awkwardly, "I want to apologize. I laughed earlier. I didn't know who you were, but that's not an excuse. I judged you by your clothes, not your character." Thomas regarded him coolly for a moment. Then he spoke. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about how many people like me walk into places like this every day and get judged, dismissed, treated like we don't belong. That has to stop." The man nodded solemnly. "You're right, and I'll do better." Thomas turned to the showroom at large. "This place will change. Starting today, every single location under Garrett Systems will implement mandatory diversity and inclusion training. And every manager will undergo quarterly reviews for biased behavior. I won't allow this culture of exclusion to continue under my name." The entire room remained quiet. Thomas walked over to the same sapphire blue Porsche Taycan and rested his hand on its hood. "I came here to buy this for my daughter," he said, "but I think the lesson this morning might be a better gift. A reminder that no matter how high you rise, you'll still be judged by your skin if we don't change things. And if you have the power to do something about it, you should." 3 weeks passed. From the outside, Chandler Prestige Motors looked exactly the same. The same shimmering marble floors, the same lineup of high-end European cars, the same signature jazz playing softly in the background. But inside, everything had changed. Brandon and Chase were gone. So were 2 other employees who had quietly resigned after being asked to participate in bias training. In their place, a new energy had begun to settle in, a culture not built on appearance or assumption, but on character, competence, and compassion. And at the heart of it all was a new voice. Erica Miles. She stood near the reception desk, not nervously, like she once did, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her place. After completing an accelerated leadership training program under the personal mentorship of Thomas Garrett and his executive team, she had been appointed assistant general manager. She wasn't just there to keep things running, she was there to lead a new era. Her first act? Creating the Garrett Dignity Program, a new customer service philosophy built on one simple rule. Everyone who walks through these doors deserves to be seen, heard, and treated with respect. On this particular morning, Erica straightened her blouse and glanced at the clock. Today was special, because today, Thomas Garrett was returning with his daughter. Outside, a black Tesla Model X pulled up silently. The rear door opened, and Dr. Maya Garrett stepped out, 25 years old, recently graduated with honors from Harvard Business School. Hair natural, blazer crisp, eyes full of fire. She had her father's composure and her mother's grace. As they stepped through the doors, staff stood a little straighter. They knew who she was, but more importantly, they understood what this visit meant. Erica walked up and extended a hand. "Dr. Garrett, Mr. Garrett, welcome back." Maya smiled warmly. "It's good to be here. My dad's told me everything." "I hope he left out the worst parts," Erica said with a slight laugh. "He didn't," Maya replied, "but he told me you were the first person who saw what was really happening, and that you spoke up. That matters." Erica nodded. "I didn't think it did at the time. I thought I was just risking my job." Thomas spoke up then. "Sometimes, the smallest act of integrity is the spark that ignites real change." They walked across the showroom together, until they reached the familiar sapphire blue Porsche Taycan. Maya's eyes widened. "Is this?" "It's yours," Thomas said. "Every mile of it, and every lesson that came before it." She ran her hand along the car's curve and turned to her father. "You didn't have to go through all that for me." He smiled. "No, but maybe someone had to. For you, for Erica, for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong when in fact, they do." The paperwork didn't take long. Garrett Systems employees had already streamlined the process. Maya drove the car out of the showroom with the grace and ease of someone who had nothing to prove, and everything to become. But Thomas didn't leave right away. He stood near the entrance, watching customers come and go. A young Latino father in dusty work boots held his child's hand as he discussed leasing options. A black couple in their 60s test drove a luxury sedan and laughed joyfully with a salesman who treated them like royalty. Things were different now. Not perfect, but different. And that mattered. Gregory Levesque joined him by the door. "Customer satisfaction ratings are up 18%, he said. "We're seeing improvements across every store that implemented the Garrett Dignity Program." Thomas nodded. "And employee turnover?" "Down by a third," Gregory replied. "People stay when they're respected." A pause. Then Thomas said something quiet. "It's funny. I walked in here one morning trying to buy a car, and ended up redesigning an entire system." Gregory gave a slight chuckle. "Not funny, just necessary." Thomas looked toward Erica, now helping a young man in a wheelchair compare interior features. "She's going to run this place one day," he said. "Maybe even the whole company." "Should I prep the succession paperwork?" Gregory teased. "Maybe not yet," Thomas said with a smile. "But soon." A few minutes later, Thomas got into his Civic, still running strong, still dependable, and pulled out of the parking lot for the last time as just a customer. He left behind more than just a dealership. He left behind a new standard. A standard that was spreading. 6 months later, Chandler Prestige Motors had become a case study in corporate transformation. Harvard Business Review published a feature called The Garrett Standard: How Humility and Leadership Rebuilt a Brand from Within. Erica spoke at conferences. Maya launched a mentorship network for first-generation business students. And Thomas? He stayed out of the spotlight. He didn't need recognition. The real reward was knowing that somewhere, someone would walk into a dealership like his and be treated like they mattered, no questions asked. And maybe that's the question for us today. Have you ever judged someone by how they looked only to find out later you were wrong? What would you do if you had a second chance to treat them differently? Because sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one you chose to ignore. And sometimes, dignity doesn't walk in wearing a suit. Sometimes, it comes in sneakers. And it changes everything.